I'm sure you've been seeing some of the discourse lately around electoralism. Electoralism is a very hot topic on lefty Twitter because everyone seems to have an opinion on it, and almost all of them are wrong except for mine. So we're going to talk about electoralism, and we're going to kind of go over some of the dumber takes about them. So I'm going to give you two examples. We're going to look at one that is just stupid. It's just stupid on its face, and then one that is also stupid, but it is couched in at least the appearance of something more thoughtful. So let's take a look. These are just a couple that I've seen. This is not the end all be all of the anti-electoralism crowd. So this is poly people. Um, I'm not doing the segment on poly people because honestly, I'm not interested in drama with poly people because she's an idiot and boring, and I don't care. Um, she like there is no use in talking to or interacting with poly people because it's literally like talking to a brick wall. However, this is a common sentiment that I see from people who are like poly people and follow poly people, and that means it's worth talking about. So we're going to look at this tweet. She said, I will not be voting for Joe Biden, not in the primary, not in the general election. He doesn't stand for me. That's calculated. He allows Republicans to oppress people, including people like me, for votes. Meanwhile, he sells out the working class. I can't morally vote for them. I thought you said poly people is in the group of polyamorous people. That's much better than who we're talking about. Poly people is making a very dumb argument. I feel like we're watching 2016 again. Oh, just wait. So, what's Polly getting at? Let's kind of break this down a second. So, allows Republicans to oppress people, including people like me, for votes. Meanwhile, he sells out the working class. Those are her examples. So, let's take a look. The first thing I would want to know is exactly how he is allowing Republicans to oppress people. The only thing I can think would be the case is that Biden, being a liberal, is amenable to certain conservative ideals and also tends to try to compromise with Republicans, which means sometimes things that he does don't benefit us, or they benefit Republicans, or they don't benefit us as much because they're watered down. I think this is on its face a fine critique, but it's not an excuse for not voting for Biden. As for the other thing, he sells out the working class. What? He's a liberal. Of course he sells out the working class. Like what are we talking about here? Liberals hate the working class. They like the working class more than Republicans do, but like what huh? The thing is that let's go into the other one before we get into the actual so the other one here is a little bit more detail. I saw this one the other day. I actually responded to this thread on Twitter. No, leftists should not vote for Joe Biden, a thread. And we got Dark Brandon here. Based Dark Brandon. I feel it necessary to clarify who I am speaking to. When I write this, I speak not to liberals, not to social democrats, but to the broad coalition of anti capitalists who believe a better world is possible. To this group, I make my case. There is no excuse for voting for Joseph Biden. The argument in favor of voting for Biden rests almost entirely on lesser evilism, the idea that although Biden is bad, we must vote for him because he is less bad than the alternatives. I do not disagree with the concept of harm reduction or supporting a lesser evil. I simply disagree that Biden's being in office meaningfully reduces any harm done by America. We'll come back to this later. Under the Biden administration, queer rights, labor rights, and protest rights have all seen major setbacks. Some will say that this is not Biden's fault, but Trump's due to him nominating 3 Supreme Court justices. This is mostly true. Short of an executive order to enforce these rights, such as Eisenhower did in Little Rock, Biden cannot personally overturn these decisions. Even if he were to try to do this, its legitimacy would be questionable. The fact that those who defend Biden in this way are somewhat right only lends credence to my argument. Outside of appointing justices, the president has little power over domestic politics. With a Republican supermajority on the Supreme Court, the next president will have little sway over the outcomes of court decisions. The only way the makeup of the Supreme Court will change in any meaningful way is if Biden were to pack the court, which he refuses to do. One cannot simultaneously believe that Biden is powerless to prevent the awful things happening domestically in America, yet he must be elected to save democracy or protect minority rights. Biden can either be the last bastion between liberalism and fascism or a powerless victim of the system, but he cannot be both. The cognitive dissonance of those on the reformist left who somehow hold these two contradictory beliefs is astounding and, quite frankly, worrying. In the current situation we find ourselves in, there is no better time for the left to try to build a third party. With the next president having even less influence on domestic politics than normal, those interested in harm reduction should focus on where the president actually has power: foreign policy. The American foreign policy program is nearly unanimously bipartisan. The two leading candidates, Trump and Biden, have both contributed enormously to American imperialism, as every president before has. Trump implemented horrific sanctions on Venezuela and Biden on Afghanistan. Notably, Biden hasn't reversed any of Trump's sanctions, and it seems improbable that Trump would undo Biden's actions either. Both have continued American involvement in Syria and escalated tensions with China. The single example of Biden's de escalation of American imperialism was the withdrawal from Afghanistan, something actually started by Trump. With both leading candidates being practically identical in the one area in which they have major influence, either of them winning the election would not be harm reduction in any way. The suffering inflicted upon victims of the American empire, such as the thousands who perish annually due to sanctions, innocent children killed by American weaponry, and inhabitants of nations occupied by American troops, will remain unaffected whether Biden or Trump assume office. Those who advocate for harm reduction but overlook the largest harm caused by the American presidency, the atrocities in the developing world, deny the humanity of those in the periphery. For these reasons, there is absolutely no excuse not to vote for a third party in the upcoming election. While Cornel West is not my ideal candidate, he is a reformist anti communist socialist, I believe him to be the best option. He is at least nominally anti imperialism, which is far more than can be said of Biden or Trump. A vote for Cornel West has the potential to genuinely reduce harm, while a vote for Biden changes nothing. Any sincere leftist should have no difficulty making. So, what do we think? Yes, this was all just a giant advertisement for Cornel West. So we're going to break this down a little bit. We're going to talk first about, there's a lot here, by the way. We're going to talk first about the lesser evil and harm reduction thing, and we're going to go into the third party thing. The first major point here is that lesser evilism doesn't generally work when both candidates are functionally identical. And in this case, they kind of make the argument that, well, they don't kind of, they straight up say Trump and Biden are functionally identical in every way except, well, actually, no, in every way, right? Because they have no ability to do anything domestically. And the only way that they could affect something would be through foreign policy. And they're functionally identical there. Obviously, this is not true. The assertion that Donald Trump and Joe Biden are in any way functionally identical when it comes to any issue, but let alone foreign policy, world politics, is absurd. Like, legitimately. You can't just look at just the actions that they've taken, right? Because I obviously haven't like done a ton of research into all of the individual things that Trump and Biden have done for foreign policy. I'm going to admit right now that foreign policy is not my, best subject. That said, you can't just look at just the things, like what they've done. You can't look at only those things because you also have to take a look at what they want, what their policy positions are, what the party backing them wants. You also have to know what they could potentially do versus what they want to do. Trump and Biden are not the same when it comes to anything. There are obviously overlaps. Being a liberal, Biden is going to be obviously closer to Trump than to, say, a fucking anarchist. But if we're judging things based on, that level, we are never going to be satisfied. I want to look at this one too. Um, where was it? Basically that because neither of them can do anything, right? Because they can't do anything on the domestic level, we have to focus on foreign policy. This makes a presumption that they haven't actually proven, that they have no influence on like domestic policy. They're not wrong to point out that Trump and Biden have a limited amount of power given the Supreme Court, right? That's how the system is designed to function. The president can't have unlimited power. There has to be some sort of check to that. So the Supreme Court is the thing. And it is true, Biden could pack the Supreme Court and won't, which is a bad thing. However, the idea that even with the Supreme Court, Biden can do nothing is not what people are saying. This is actually misunderstanding what people are refuting when they're talking about the Supreme Court. Biden can only do so much given the Supreme Court, but the fact that the Supreme Court is already stacked in favor of Republicans means that we can't have a Republican president. I need people to understand that. I literally need people to let that sink in, okay? If you are thinking that like you should vote third party or that electoralism doesn't work, I need you to remember, okay? The fact that the Supreme Court is stacked against us, limiting the amount of things that the president can do, is why we can't elect a Republican. It is already a danger to have a Supreme Court that can ruin our ability to pass specific legislation or to, you know, have certain rights protected. We cannot risk Donald Trump or any other Republican candidate winning for that reason, because then there's no check, especially given the fact that we do have it stacked together. Like there's not any chance to do this. And this is the other part of this that I noted on Twitter, by the way. The way this thread reads kind of feels like, right? Kind of feels like we're looking for a quick solution. Oh, well, let's elect the third party candidate and then we'll have things happen. And they acknowledge that even if Cornel West was elected to the presidency, there would still be the Supreme Court. And to be clear, Cornel West would be also better than Donald Trump. But Cornel West doesn't have a shot. Third parties don't. We'll get to that in a second. I also genuinely wonder if anyone knows the electoral process when I see shit like this. Both from the perspective of how the government works, but also from the perspective of the process of getting elected. Because in order to write this, you cannot be somebody who has ever run for office or known somebody who's run for office. Because this is not realistic. You feel there's any reason people are determined to play around with election and voting now while we're on the line to a transgenocide and voting being completely skewed against? So I actually think that a lot of people just don't realize or don't care. Someone in chat said earlier that this was a really privileged take, and I agree with them. The reason why is because in order to look at the state of the country right now and then to then throw up your hands and say, well, I guess there's nothing we can do, so let's focus on what we can do outside of the country. both ignores that there are actually things that we can do and actually things that we have to focus on, and also ignores the plight of a lot of people here. It's placing value on foreign policy and the effects of that on people outside of the country against people inside of the country. And I'm not saying necessarily that that's a bad thing, right? Because people in other countries are not by any means less valuable than people from the US. That said, for the purposes of voting, you can't just place one above the other. Both of these are important. Foreign policy is important. Domestic policy is also important. You can't just like write off one of them for nothing. The fact of the matter is that in the choice between Donald Trump and Joe Biden, neither one of them are good on foreign policy, and only one of them is somewhat good on domestic policy. We're talking about a matter of degrees here. And so when you're faced with that choice, taking the one that is going to give you the best possible outcome in the moment is the best choice. We do this forever. That like the death and taxes phrase, like like the only things that are like certain is death and taxes, right? This is like death and taxes, right? The only thing that is certain when we're talking about electoralism is that there will like be one guy that's bad and one guy that is slightly less bad, and you're going to have to pick the guy that is slightly less bad, and you do this ad nauseum until you die. In a two-party system, that is how it works. Yes, Storm, every 4 years you have to pay attention and make a choice. I can't believe they would do this to us. Now, the other part that I want to talk about with this is the third party thing. And we don't actually have to look at this anymore. The third party thing. So why should you not vote for a third party? Pretty simple. They can't win. I mean that is the thing. And I know that people like, what was their name? Earl Robinson, which by the way, I want to preface with everyone. Do not go harass this person or poly people. Do not like even perceive them. Get like as soon as the stream ends, I want you to erase them from your mind. But according to like people like them, they would say, well, third parties are never going to win if we don't ever vote for them. And you're not wrong. That is how it works. If you don't vote for someone, they don't win. The problem is, no one is going to vote for them. Historically speaking, third parties just can't win outside of occasionally local and national races. And even in the cases where like a lot of where like national races, like someone's won with third party, I'm pretty sure it's usually people who are independent win, which is lack of a party affiliate. The problem is that in a two-party system, a third party can't thrive. That's why it's a two-party system. It's specifically designed to prevent other parties from getting in because those two parties have to dominate. The fact of the matter is when you look at the votes that all of the third-party candidates in national elections have had over the last, several years, they don't have a chance. We're talking about like 1 to 5% of the vote, maybe. And then we also have to like ask the question, like, okay, then what? Then what? Like, what happens? The Cornell West wins. What happens? What is he going to do? You've already acknowledged that he can't do anything with the Supreme Court, right? So like domestic policy's out. So he's not going to do anything for trans people. Okay. Not going to do anything for the queer community generally. He's not going to do anything for women's rights, for abortion. We're not going to have anything happen there. Okay. So he's going to do foreign policy. What's he going to do with foreign policy? He's going to do what? Never explained any of that. And sure, maybe he wants to, pull out of all of these places. Maybe he wants to, be less involved in foreign conflicts or in, you know, have less military bases, shit like that. Okay, cool. Then what? Like, then what? Explain to me. I need to know. Because right now all I'm hearing is we're going to get Cornell West and then profit. Like, what? But anyway, I feel like I'm rambling, but like I wanted to talk about this because we are coming into election season. It's my understanding that they're going to be starting to have like primary debates and stuff soon, or like a lot of candidates are announcing things. This is going to start mattering very quickly. We need to be aware of it, and we're going to get a lot of these fucking like anti-electoralist um people crawling out of the woodworks to try to convince people to vote for their spoiler candidates. And I am going to call them spoiler candidates with a derogatory bent because I don't care. I don't respect any of you. This stuff matters. And knowing how to like combat this like framework is important. So to kind of like wrap up, right? The reason why anti-electoralism doesn't function is because, for one, it shows a lack of understanding of both how the system works and how like candidacy works. It is, generally speaking, very defeatist and doomerist. It actually isn't helpful. It's actually negative helpful. It actually harms us because convincing people not to vote for somebody when like people's lives are on the line, when we're talking about issues that actually like are affecting a ton of people, that is, I think, neglectful. I'm not even gonna be non-committal. I'm going to say you're being neglectful to marginalized communities when you're voting against candidates that have a chance to keep like the thin line between us like just not having rights and like like continuing to function in democracy. You're actively being neglectful. You're actively putting people in harm's way. And when we're talking about voting for third parties, which is not the same thing as the anti-electoralism, but often comes along with the anti-electoralist talking points, as we just saw, third parties can't win. Fuck you. That's it. That's all I have to say. There's no chance of them winning. Get us ranked choice voting, which surprisingly is mostly supported by Democrats. Get us that, and then come talk to me about a third party. Then I will consider voting for your third party candidates, your Cornell Wests of the world. So yeah, that's all I have to say. I wanted to talk about this because like we're gonna have to be paying more attention to electoral politics soon. That includes me. I've been kind of like, you know, not plugged in enough, and that's going to change, and we're going to have to be paying attention to it. And as we're doing that, we have to look out for like pieces of shit statements like this that are trying to convince you that both A, voting isn't worth anything, and B, that voting for candidates that have no chance of winning is better than voting for candidates that can at least stave off fascism for like 30 seconds. So yeah, that's all I got to say. We'll see you in the next one. Thanks so much for watching. If you like this video, make sure to leave a like, a comment, and subscribe. And if you'd like to support the channel further, you can become a channel member by clicking the join button, leave a super chat or a super thanks. You can become a patron at patreon.com/SaigeAlexis, or you could donate to my coffee. The link for that will be in the description below. Thank you so much, and I'll see you in the next one.